Good morning. Good morning. This is Valerie Leonard. I'm the founder of nonprofit Utopia. I want to say thank you so much for joining us, and I want to welcome you all. If you are watching us from Facebook Live or YouTube Live or any other of our streaming services, we ask that you please participate in the conversation. We pray that you would add comments and any questions that you might have. And I will look at those once the presentation is over, and then we can engage in hopefully what I hope will be a lively discussion. As you may or may not know, we are celebrating Fundraising Month in the month of October. This is our last live stream as it relates to fundraising, but we also realize, particularly in this time, with COVID-19, we will probably need to focus more on fundraising, and we will make sure that we incorporate fundraising and marketing type of things, all throughout the year. All right. So as you may or may not remember, we focused on how to develop your case for support. And then after that, we focused on how to develop your fundraising plan, and then how to write effective grant proposals. And then last week, we focused on Giving Tuesday. If you missed any of that, please go to our YouTube channel. That's Nonprofit Utopia on YouTube, and you will be able to download those videos and make sure that you can catch up. It's our goal to share as much information as possible to folks on fundraising and other issues in nonprofit. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and go into our presentation. So if you can just bear with me for just a moment. Okay, I do apologize. I seem to have lost connection with my camera, and we are back, thankfully. And if you can hold on just a moment, I'm going to share my screen, and we will go into our presentation. Alrighty, as I indicated before, we're going to talk about how to cultivate donors. It's one thing to write a nice case for support. It's another thing to develop a fundraising plan and a wonderful grant proposal. And it's also wonderful to plan for Giving Tuesday. But if you haven't figured out how to cultivate donors, then your efforts are going to really be a crapshoot. All right. So before we talk about cultivating donors, I just want to give you a little bit of information about Nonprofit Utopia, and please bear with me. I'm feeling a little congested right now. So we are the ideal community for emerging nonprofit leaders, and we've created a safe space where our members can innovate and share stories about what goes on with them on a day-to-day basis, and they can share information and resources. And our goal is to train the next generation of ethical nonprofit leaders, and we do that through a number of ways. We do consulting. We have an online community. We also do coaching and courses. All right. And our overall goal is to give the folks in our community the tools that they need to strengthen their leadership skills and to build their organizations to a point where they're sustainable and beyond. And our vision is to strengthen the global nonprofit nonprofit sector by developing and training up to 50,000 leaders between now and 2033. And one of the ways we do that is through programs like these. But again, we really focus on consulting, courses, as well as coaching. And a little bit about myself, I have been in this space, oh my goodness, for well over 20 years. I started off as a financial analyst for a major hospital. I also have experience running a nonprofit organization. And over the years, I've helped over, excuse me, over 750 people in capacity building. And that includes helping to raise over $100 million. And I'm also the host of the nonprofit Utopia internet show. And you can catch us on Blog Talk Radio on Tuesdays. And I'm sorry, on Mondays at 3:00. And I also teach courses online for the University of Illinois in nonprofit management. And I'm also on staff at Roosevelt University, helping students to develop their business plans. Alrighty, so I just want to give a little bit of a refresher so that this information isn't foreign to those of you who haven't been following along. As you know, it's very, very important before you raise any money to really understand the needs of the community. So you need to do a community needs assessment. And from our perspective, we really don't want to look at the community from a perspective of having a deficit, but we want to look at the community as actually having assets. So it's a way of, I guess, taking stock of the assets that a community has, its people, its other resources, and gauge their opinions, their assumptions, their key issues, and or assets within a specific boundary. So community could be a neighborhood, community could be a city, it could be a town, whatever your service area is. And then after that, you really want to develop your case for support. And the case for support is pretty much like a prospectus. For those of you who may invest in stocks or bonds or mutual funds, before you invest, you are given a prospectus to better understand the company or companies that you're investing in, their strengths and weaknesses, their financial performance, and all of that good stuff. So similarly, a nonprofit organization is going to develop a case for support, and they're going to outline, the needs in the community and how they're best suited to, in fact, address those needs. And here is a sample outline of what you might find in a case for support. That will include things like your history, the community needs assessment, the goals and objectives, visions, programs and services, impact, and your fundraising goal. So obviously the history, you're going to share some background about the organization that gives the donor a real good sense of comfort that you can do, in fact, what you say that you're going to do. And it can also help the donor to understand whether or not your mission and goals and objectives are in alignment with their programs and services and missions and goals. All right, the community needs assessment, you'll answer questions like, what are the issues in the community and what are some of the trends, how they impact your target clients, and you'll also give an assessment of who's doing the work and how you fit into that whole community, what makes you different, how are you going to work with the other players, etc. And then you've got the goals and objectives. Basically, the goals outline what you're going to do, and the objectives tell how you're going to do it. And hopefully you're doing it in a smart way, meaning that they're specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely, meaning they have deadlines. And then your vision, that's the grand picture of what you hope the world is going to look like as a result of your organization being in existence, and preferably through your programs and services. And your programs and services, obviously, they are done for the good of the community. Your services are or are done for the good of the community, and we're not necessarily being intentional about making a change, whereas your programs and services, they're done for the good of the community, and we can in fact prove that there is some impact because we're being very intentional. We've got goals and objectives. We got activities that are aligned with those goals and objectives, and then we're working toward a set of outcomes. And all of that goes to show what your impact is. What will have changed as a result of any interventions that you're doing? And then finally, your fundraising goal is how much money you're trying to raise so that in fact you can achieve your goals and the desired impact. Alrighty. And then after that, we talked about the fundraising plan. And as you know, you need to develop a budget, but your fundraising plan answers the question as to how you're going to raise the money that you're going to need to make an impact. So where's that money going to come from? How is it going to be used? And what is the time frame for your using that money? And then before you approach donors, and when we talk about donors, we're talking about major donors, we're talking about donors who can, in fact, provide large sums of money. And large might mean different things to different groups, depending on where you are in your development. So if you're a startup organization, a large donation might be $500. It might be $1,000. So you basically want to look at where your largest donations are coming from, and that'll give you a sense for what is large for you. If you are a multi-million-dollar organization, a large donation for you might be, say, $1 million or $10 million. So it's all relative based on what your history of fundraising is. So before you get out there and meet with the funders, you need to do an assessment, assess your situation. Sometimes this can be a formal tool and sometimes it can be informal, depending on what kind of systems you already have in place. And if you're a member of the nonprofit Utopia community, we will have these tools for you in the community so you can do a self-assessment. So your self-assessment is going to help you to answer questions such as, is your organization in compliance with state and federal regulatory agencies? So when we talk about the state and federal regulatory agencies, for one, on the federal level, we're talking about the IRS. Every year you need to do a filing or do an annual report with the IRS. It's Form 990, and that is done in lieu of a tax return. It's basically an information return that you have to disclose, your financials, as well as, your board and your program activities, et cetera, et cetera. So every year you have to file that. And then on the state level, you have to do, at least in the state of Illinois, you have to do your AG 990, which is the state equivalent to, or the state counterpart for the 990. And then you also need to make sure that that you file your reports with the Secretary of State. Another question you need to answer is, are your board members actively engaged? I'm sure you don't need to do a formal assessment. You know whether or not folks are engaged in coming to meetings, whether or not they're out there raising money, if they are contributing to your cause. Ideally, you should not approach any funder until 100% of your board has in fact made a contribution. And then another question, very important question, is, do you have financial controls and systems in place to track your fundraising? So you need to make sure that you have financial policies and procedures that actually outline how money is going to be tracked. And it also outlines the controls to make sure that no one person is in control of all the financials or the financial reporting or financial management. There are checks and balances to minimize the opportunity for any shenanigans, right? So you want to make sure you have all of that in place. And then you also want to make sure that you have a mechanism in place to track specific gifts where you can track programs and track the funders for each one of those programs. So in the event that your funder asks for a report of how you've done, of what you've done for their money, you'll be able to pull it quick, fast, and in a hurry. Another question you're going to need to answer is your organization respected in the community? And believe you me, when you approach any funders, they have feelers out in the community so they can get a sense for what the perception of your organization is in the community. And then also, you want to make sure that your organization has a demonstrated track record of success and impact. And all of that will be included in your case for support. So after you do that assessment, you want to, do some brainstorming and develop a list of prospective major donors. That could be people who have already donated. It could be people that, people or foundations or other entities that you are hoping that you can have to donate in the future. So your list should be relatively long. I would say no fewer than 50 people, and probably ideally it's over 200, because you're going to be approaching people on a regular basis. So you want to develop a donor cultivation system. And I'm going to share with you some notes from my reading of Amy Eisenstein's work. And she has some really, really good methods to make cultivation very, very simple. And if you follow her method, you can raise major funds 30 minutes a day. If you just take 30 minutes out of every day, you'll be well on your way to attracting major gifts. All right, so here is a sample of her donor cultivation plan, and you can tailor this to your own needs. So, for example, and this was pre-COVID-19, during the month of January, you might consider inviting major donor prospects on a tour, let them tour your facility. So in the age of COVID-19, rather than invite them for a formal tour, you might consider doing a virtual tour. So preparing a presentation on Zoom or a video that gives people a really good sense for the day-to-day operations for your organization. And that tour should also highlight how your clients are being impacted. It should highlight how every person is engaged, from your receptionist on up to your board chair. Everybody has a story to tell, and you want to make sure that they're telling their story from their perspective as to how they're making a contribution toward your mission, right? So during the month of February, you want to send copy of your winter newsletter. That's assuming you do something on a quarterly basis. If you're doing a monthly newsletter, you want to make sure that they're on your newsletter list. You want, in the month of March, assuming that you're doing a gala, you want to send an invitation with a personal note. And this day and age, we'll be doing a number of virtual events rather than the physical galas. In the month of April, assuming you're having that gala during the month of April, make a point of sitting next to that person that you invite. You want to be a good host or hostess. So in the absence of being able to sit next to that person, you might want to think of other other ways that you can make that person feel welcome in advance of the event. All right. And even during the event, you might want to have something special for those people who may not necessarily have given, but you're trying to cultivate that gift. So it might be some special appreciation or some special recognition, some special thank you publicly, just to let them know that you're very much aware of their presence. You appreciate them taking the time to be with you. All right. During the month of May, you might consider taking them out to coffee. And in the age of COVID-19, that might be you might consider a virtual coffee. And notice too that the people who are responsible, you know, these are relatively high level people in your organization. The DOD stands for the Director of Development, or it could be a board member, it could be your executive director. So you want to make sure that they understand that their presence is important enough to you where you're sending out your big guns, right? So in the month of July, I'm assuming that there's no activity here because they're on vacation, but that doesn't mean that your own plan doesn't include activities in July. And then in August, you might consider a phone call update or email. And then during the month of September, you might consider sending your quarterly newsletter with a personal note. And then October, schedule a meeting to make the ask, because you notice, for the first few months, you've been courting them, you've been sharing with them, the total experience of your organization. So by the time you're asking for money, you're not an unknown quantity to them. And then in November, consider inviting them to a program or service event, assuming it's safe to do so. And then in December, send them a holiday card. And this is not to mention that you should be engaging them regularly on social media. Make sure you're following them on social media and keeping them apprised of updates through social media as you would any of your other followers. Oh, and then, sorry. And so the way this is set up, you've got the various months and the activities, you indicate who's responsible, and then there's a little section on the far right where you can indicate the status or, write any special notes that people in your organization or you as the person who's raising money and maintaining these relationships should in fact know. Things like the birthdays, if you know that, if you read where one of your prospects or is involved in some other activity or has this hobby, you want to do things to make sure that you strike up things that are in common and let them know that you're thinking about them, personally. All right. So if we were to divide this up, every day you're doing something to cultivate your relationships with your prospective donors. And then don't forget the people who have already made their contribution. So Monday is your call day. And you want to do all of these activities before noon because after 12 o'clock, we tend to get busy with other things. All right. So before 12 o'clock noon, you want to call 5 donors or prospective donors. And, and what your conversation is about is going to be very highly dependent on what your relationship is. So the conversation you have with someone that you know and who has contributed is going to be a little bit different than the conversation that you're having with someone that you just met yesterday, right? So use a little common sense there in terms of what your approaches are. You don't want to be so forward with people that you just meet and they never take your call again. All right, so here's some reasons that you might make the call. Obviously you want to call to thank them for being a supporter. If you're just coming off of an event, you want to make the call and say thank you. If they have just given you money, you want to call and say thank you. If they have volunteered for an event, you want to call and say thank you. You might want to call to schedule a meeting to ask for a gift. You want to call to invite them to volunteer or work on a project that you might have a mutual affinity for. You might want to call and ask for advice. Make a call to give them an update as to where you are. So you want to maintain the relationships. Don't get too cozy, but you also want to be friendly enough where they get to see the human side. All right. So Tuesday is your cultivation day. And for every person on your list, you want to try to get 2 in-person meetings. And in this age of COVID-19, it might be 2 Zoom calls or something similar. And in between the meetings, you need to keep them, abreast of your activities. So every Tuesday, you want to spend 30 minutes making these calls. All right. So in some cases, you're going to be scheduling the visits. In other cases, you're going to be sending email updates. In other cases, you're going to be writing handwritten notes and sending them through snail mail. That makes a real impact, especially this day when everybody's typing on the computer. And then in other cases, you're going to be inviting them to volunteer. And then you're going to also aim to work on 5 different donors every Tuesday. So notice we're doing this in increments of 5 and then for 30 minutes a day. So roughly 6 minutes per person, right? So Wednesday is your ask day. On Wednesdays, you want to formulate your task and you want to take 30 minutes every week to schedule ask visits with donors. So obviously beforehand, you want to think about what you're going to ask for and how much, and then also, let them know what the rationale for the ask is. And you want to, whenever you do the ask, you want to make sure that you've demonstrated that you've been a wise and responsible steward in the past. And you want to, to the best of your ability, you want to plan out the meeting. And if you're if you're taking someone else with you or someone else is going to join you on a Zoom call, you want to meet with that person, have a meeting before the meeting so you can role play and figure out what you're going to say and think about think about your strategy. Will one person do the talking and the other person is there for backup? Are you going to split the speaking roles and all of that good stuff? Everything is all about strategy. And then if you're going by yourself, you want to be able to practice, hopefully ahead of time in the mirror. Sounds, very similar to preparing for a job interview, but think of all the questions that you can possibly think of. Put yourself in the shoes of your prospective donor, and you want to make sure that you're prepared. And then you also want to be able to respond, and if it's a yes, if it's a no, and if it's a maybe. And remember that every no is not final. In many instances, a no is not now. You have to continue to cultivate that relationship. And it might take 2 touches. It may take 5 touches, it may take 10 touches before people get that warm and fuzzy. They want to get a sense for your consistency. They want to get a sense for your impact. They want to get a sense for whether or not you might be a good person or, and when I say a good person, I'm talking about your organization. Is your organization a good fit given the culture of your organization, a good fit with what it is that they are trying to do as an organization? So Thursday is accountability day. All right. So you want to make sure that you're tracking all of your activities. This is really, really important, especially in those early seasons when you're getting a lot of no's. And quite frankly, during your latter seasons, you may be getting a lot of no's, because it's very, very competitive out there. The needs are greater now than they've been in a while. And money is being channeled toward more emergency uses. So you need to, make sure that, you take all of that stuff into account, right? So when you are accountable and you can see your activity, that can be very, very encouraging. You can see that all of your work is not in vain. And also when you see the reports, it helps you to direct your activities to those activities that are going to bear the most fruit. All right. So you're going to need tools and techniques to help you stay on track and accountable. And you want to start off by recruiting somebody on your team who you can mutually hold one another accountable. This could be your executive director. This could be your director of development. This could be someone who's running a program. It could be a board member. And you want to get together for 10 minutes each week to discuss what it is you need to be doing. So you want to review what happened the last week And then you want to look at, what you should be doing for the next week. Then after that, you want to check in to see, what actually got done. And then again, 30 minutes a day, you're blocking off. And when I say, 30 minutes a day, you're blocking off time to engage in activities to cultivate relationships. And on Thursday, that 30 minutes is going to be focused on accountability. All right. So again, you want to do this before lunch so that you don't get bogged down in other activities, and you want to make sure that you can stay on track. All right. So when you look at the kinds of things that you want to keep track of, you want to look at things like the number of calls made, the number of visits made, the number of Zoom calls you made, the number of stewardship efforts you made, say thank you and report out. And here is, I think, a wonderful chart that Amy Eisenstein put together to really help to keep track. All right. So if, as you can see on the different roles, you're looking at the month, you're looking at last year actual, you're looking at the low goal, you're looking at the high goal, and then you're looking at this year. So in that first column A, you're looking at the total dollars that you're asking for. And then column B, you're looking at the number of dollars that you actually received. All right. And then you're looking at the number of people that you ask. And then you look at the number of gifts you actually receive. And then you're looking at the retention rate, so number of returning donors. And then the acquisition, that's your number of new donors. And then you're looking at the number of meaningful visits, the number of phone calls, the size of the gift, and your stewardship effort. So how are you engaging people after the gift has actually been made? How are you saying thank you? And you want to say thank you early and often? All right. So, just so you know, it all adds up. All right. So your small actions every week can lead to big success. And you might not, you honestly may not see fruit for 3 to 6 months, depending on where your relationships are, depending on, how consistent you are. But if you're consistent, just think one phone call a day, that adds up to 250 phone calls every year. 2 visits a month, that's 24 visits a year. 3 hours a week, that's 100 hours spent on major gifts every year. And that's just on your major gifts. And you might want to track things like, how many tours do you have? How many people you have coming to your events and all that good stuff. If it's important to you reaching your fundraising goal with major funders, then it's important to track. All right. And remember that Friday is your stewardship day. All right. So every week, again, you devoting 30 minutes a day for various activities. So on Fridays, you want to spend 30 minutes out of the day saying thank you. All right. So 5 people every day for 30 minutes. That can yield a pretty big return. And plus, you're spreading your efforts over time so it doesn't feel overwhelming. And remember, you want to be as creative as possible. And when appropriate, have your clients draw pictures, take photos, or make small tokens of appreciation. So remember, the focus is not on you and the organization so much as it is on impact. And one of the best ways to demonstrate impact is to have the people that you've helped be able to demonstrate their story or tell their story. And after your donors have been thanked, again, thank them again and again. And remember to let them know how their gift was used, the impact they made, both in person and in writing. And if you have more time, call more donors. When in doubt, make more phone calls. All right. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing. If you have any questions, I'm hoping that you posted them in the forum. And if you want to contact me directly, you can email me at ValerieFLeonard@nonprofitutopia.com. And if you're a member of Nonprofit Utopia, feel free to post. We also have office hours, and you can make an appointment with me and we can go through anything as it relates to fundraising, that we've covered this month. And even if you have some new ideas, new questions, feel free to do that. And we're hoping that you can join us at nonprofitutopia.mn.co. That is our membership site. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on YouTube, and then you can find us on Facebook. Alrighty. So I'm going to go over your questions, and I thank you guys so much. Thank you so much. I'm going to go through these one by one. Ramona Taylor Williams, hello. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a wonderful member, wonderful engaged member, and thank you for checking in. And Carlini, thank you so much. Carlini is our marketing associate. I want to tell her thank you so much for all of the help that she's giving me, helping me to flesh out marketing strategy. And thank you so much, Carlini. Darlene Barber, good morning. Good morning. And she's saying good morning to everyone. Thank you, Tiffany. You made my day. Take your time. The ecosystem appreciates you sharing. Thank you. Sometimes I wonder, if people care, especially in this age of COVID-19 where we have to do everything online. It feels sometimes like I'm so isolated. Thank you so much for letting me know that, one, you're listening, that two, you appreciate it. I really, really appreciate it. Kayla, it's great to see you again. Thank you so much. Thank you for participating. I'm glad you're interacting with Tiffany and all of our other viewers. Thank you. Thank you. And you and I have to get together, at least virtually, and catch up. All right. And Tiffany, hey, Kayla. All righty. Kayla, awesome. Love systematic methods. All righty. And also a question, what if we don't have significant staff? Only 1 to 2, depending on funding at this point, but volunteer work is pending. I think all of those methods that Amy shared with us, I think those will work very well, regardless of what size the shop you're in. If you're a one-person shop just starting, if you are someone who is in a large institution, obviously, working within your part of the fundraising, I believe those methods can work for anyone. And if you know anything about Amy, her experience is broad. She's worked in small shops as well as for large universities. And now she is in business for herself. And quite frankly, as a small business owner, I found that a lot of those tips are helpful to me, just in my sales strategy. And Kayla, I would imagine that is true for you as well, not only as a person who is engaged with nonprofits, but as a small business owner. Okay, and then Kayla, also, am I correct in understanding that I should be reaching out monthly to the entire list of 50 to 200? That's correct. So when you think about it, you're looking at 5 people, at least 5 people a day. So your list, it may be, you're probably not going to be touching each one of those 5 people, obviously. So you're going to prioritize that list and try to match up the list of people with the particular activities based on where you are in the funding cycle, based on where you are with the relationship, based on what you're doing with the organization. So what activities. So by the end of the year, you should have touched at least 200 people, and probably even more than that. Okay, so you're doing it systematically, as you said before. And how is this different? Okay. So yeah, Kayla, you and I were on the same wavelength. I hadn't seen this comment, and you're like, so how is this different than a sales prospect funnel? Sounds very similar. Yes, the technique is very, very similar. And as you know from sales, it's all about relationships. All right. And so when you do these calls, hopefully it's not a manner in which it seems like you're doing it by rote. You're really expressing an interest in your prospect. You're also looking at ways not only can you be helped, but you want to be of service to the particular funder. Your funders have needs as well. Your funders are trying to get the word out. There may be people at various levels of the organization. It may be someone who might be a more junior person, and you have a relationship with them. You might want to help them by sharing resources that will help them to develop into a more stellar grant maker. So you want to identify the personal needs as well of your prospects and try to fill those needs. So it's not just give and take. They give and you take, and you want to be able to prove value. Remember, you're in this for a partnership and not just a transaction. When we do this from a transaction perspective, we basically hit it and quit it, and forgive that rude analogy. And you don't have anything to show for it. And it's a crapshoot as to whether or not you get any funding. But if you are actually able to create a genuine relationship in times like this, when money is tight and funders are really focusing on where they should put their money, to not only help out COVID-19, but also try to make sure that there's a lifeline for the people that they've been funding. If you have a strong enough relationship, they will take the time. If they don't have money within their own organizations, they'll introduce you to other folks who can help you. So it's really, really important to go beyond the transaction and more toward the relationship. Michelle Shorter, hey, I hope you're still listening, but if you're not, hello. For everybody who's still watching, Michelle Shorter is someone I graduated from Spelman College with, class of 85. I hope she's not mad at me for telling everybody when we graduated. And Darlene Barber, sorry, I had to walk away. What was Fridays to do? Fridays to do was stewardship. So think about, thank God it's Friday. So you want to thank your funders on Fridays. So that's stewardship, calling folks to say thank you. Michelle Shorter, she's so right. Many people do not understand the importance of gratitude. Here. Gratitude is something that can fuel you as a person who is leading an organization. Gratitude really strikes home with funders because not enough people express gratitude. And that is so true. People love to be thanked. They love that halo effect of knowing that their gift made a difference. And two, we're talking about major gifts, but these techniques should also be used, regardless of the size of the gift. And you should always thank people. I don't care if they gave you $5, $10, no gift is to be looked at, with disdain. I can remember when I was working in my own community, a low-income community on Chicago's West Side, we did an African garden, and we solicited funds from the people in the community. And people were wondering, well, why would you raise money from people who are quote unquote poor? But it's important that people have opportunities to give no matter what level. And what I have found is that people who live in the community, when they give their gift, whether it's $5, $10, $25, they become very, very vested. And I found that they were holding us more to an account than some of our major donors, which I thought was good because it really showed ownership and that they had a stake in what we were doing. You're welcome, Darlene. Okay. Kayla, you're curious about not having significant staff to meet with funders. If you don't have significant staff to meet with funders, then you really don't have significant time, right, to do what it is you're doing. And I know you know what I mean, right? So if you don't have significant staff to meet with funders, it's always best anyway to bring a board member with you, and you as the executive director of an organization, and I'm not sure if you're executive director or not, I'm just speaking in general, the majority of your time needs to be spent, if you have time, if you have the luxury of having several staff members, the majority of your time should be spent doing fundraising. But the sad thing is, even if you're a one-person shop, the majority of your time should be doing fundraising. And on top of that, you have to do everything else to keep the organization running. So again, if you don't have staff to meet with you, ideally you want to bring your board chair. You want to bring someone who can give confidence that they are cheering the organization on, someone who can speak intelligently about the organization. And you as the executive director, you need to make sure that you're schooling everyone on the organization. So everybody is an ambassador, everybody is speaking from the same script, so to speak. Alrighty, Darlene. I've had a nonprofit organization for domestic violence survivors for years. How do I get donors during these times? I don't have a housing yet, and that's one of the goals for the organization. Also, a very small board of directors. Alrighty. So, Darlene, one of the first things I would advise you to do is make sure that you guys are very clear on what your needs are. You have to have a case for support. And then you also just need to just get out there and start establishing those relationships. How do you start establishing those relationships? If you have events, and obviously those will probably be online events, you should consider inviting major donors or prospects there. Remember, I shared one of the suggestions of giving a tour, and that tour could be a virtual tour or it could be a physical tour, but in this day and age, it should probably be virtual. You want to start engaging people probably 6 to 9 months before you make the ask. And I know during this era of COVID-19, you might not feel like you have the luxury, and you probably don't. The good thing is there are a number of foundations and municipalities that are putting together emergency funding sources. So you might want to apply for some of those funds. And the fact that you are dealing with housing, that's considered an emergency need. You might want to think about what housing looks like for homeless people during the age of COVID-19. And if you can develop a significant case for support, you can demonstrate that your board members are engaged. They may not necessarily have to be rich, but you have to demonstrate that they have given some monetary amount. You want to make sure that there's 100% of the folks on your board giving, and then you just get out there. You want to make sure that everybody on your team has given, because nobody's going to invest in you if your team has not invested. And again, it starts with, making sure you have a strong case for support, making sure you have a strong board of directors that's engaged, and then you just work this formula, like I shared. Okay, and Carlina. Thank you so much, Carlini. Um, the Borgian Project, and I could be mispronouncing it, the organization has an amazing strategy for fundraising using volunteers from the marketing field. Please reach out to me and I can share it with you. Thank you so much, Carlini. I really, really appreciate that. And what I like about Carlini's idea is she's touching on something, that is really, really important, especially this day and age. And it's going to be true now more than ever. And it's going to be more true in the future than it is now, is the fact that we need to, as nonprofit practitioners, not focus solely on getting grants. We need to look at our organizations as businesses, because they really are businesses. The only difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit is your tax structure, right? So you need to focus on strengthening that business model. You want a business model that delivers value, right? And in some cases, that value is going to be compelling, such that people will give. But you also want to start developing social enterprises. So if you don't develop a separate entity that's a separate for-profit business, you might consider developing a product or a service that you can actually charge fees for, getting to the point where you're charging fees for some of your services, if not all of them, and do that on a sliding scale, assuming that you're focusing on people with the need. And a typical example of a nonprofit that is fee for service would be a hospital. So think of some of the services that you can offer based on the expertise that your organization has, and think of the fees that you might consider charging. And obviously, in that case, you're going to need not only a program model, but you'll need a business plan that will give you a sense for, what the business model is, how you're going to approach the market, how you're going to generate revenue to cover your expenses. I hope that helps. All right. And Kayla is very grateful to Carlini, and so am I. And thank you so much, Kayla. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you. What about bringing one of the community so we serve? Oh, you know what? That's just as golden, if not more golden, than having a staff person. In an ideal situation, you probably want to bring a team, someone from your board, someone from your staff, and then a client. And I think it really makes a strong impression. And you're not just window dressing. If you have someone who has honestly benefited from the program, and they can talk about, not only a one-off, but show how they've developed. If you can track what their experience has been from beginning to end. So the whole experience for that client and the transformation. So remember, we're also in the business of impact and transformation. So the extent that you can demonstrate impact, what better way to demonstrate impact than to have someone who has actually gone through your program. And then even better, if they've gone through your program and they now work for you, and even better than that, if they've gone through your program and they're now on your board, or even if they're still a client, and if they're on your board, you're sharing some really, really powerful testimonies. And, that speaks volumes. Oh, thank you, Darlene. Your blessing as well. You're quite welcome. Thank you. All righty. So, what? I can't thank you guys enough for, this engaging conversation. If you have any more questions, feel free to post. We're going to be closing it down. Oh, yes. Kayla, thank you. That's perfect. I think of civic leaders as possible funders also. That is true. In many instances, if they're not necessarily high net worth individuals, their contacts are golden. Yes, so having, the civic leaders on your board, and even if they're not on your board, having them, as advisors, having them, in some advisory council, some auxiliary board, that is also golden. All righty. Are there any other questions before we wind down? I tell you, I have enjoyed this tremendously. If you guys, want to continue the conversation in the nonprofit Utopia community, you can. Um, and then if you want to make posts on our Facebook page, if you're not necessarily a member, you can feel free to post and we will respond to any questions or comments that you have. And if you're a member of the nonprofit Utopia community, again, feel free to post, feel free to set up an appointment with me and we can go over your plans, and I'll make sure that you get, a toolbox of some of the handouts that Amy shared with us. Alrighty, so without further ado, it looks like there are no other questions or comments. Again, thank you guys, and I'm going to cut it off here. Take care. Bye-bye.